So the other one is on Krishna Island, and this is from coming live from Wicklow. The two schedules will be running till November, after which we will have just from Krishna Island. So we will start with this class, and we'll begin. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashoda Nandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashoda Nandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 9, Text 46. Tasya nirhara nadini sampare tasya bhargava yudhisthira karayitva muhurtam dukkito abhavat. Now repeat again. Tasya nirhara nadini sampare tasya bhargava yudhisthira karayitva muhurtam dukkito bhavat. Anybody likes to repeat?
Tasya nirharanadini sampare tasya bhargava yudhisthira karayitva muhurtam dukkito bhavat. Tasya nirharanadini sampare tasya bhargava yudhisthira karayitva muhurtam dukkito abhavat.
Reading the translation. O descendant of Birgu, Shaunaka, after performing funeral rituals for the dead body of Bhishma Dev, Maharaj Yudhishthira was momentarily overtaken with grief. Purport. Bhishma Deva was not only a great family head of Maharaj Yudhishthira, but also he was a great philosopher and friend to him, his brothers, and his mother. Since Maharaj Pandu, the father of the 5 brothers headed by Maharaj Yudhishthira, had died, Bhishma Deva was the most affectionate grandfather of the Pandavas and caretaker of the widowed daughter-in-law Kunti Devi. Although Maharaj Yudhishthira, the elder uncle of Maharaj Yudhishthira, was there to look after him, his affection was more on the side of his 100 sons, headed by Duryodhana. Ultimately, a colossal clique was fabricated to deprive the 5 fatherless brothers from the rightful claim of the kingdom of Hastinapura. There was great intrigue common in imperial palaces, and the 5 brothers were exiled to the wilderness. But Bhishma Dev was always a sincere, sympathetic well-wisher, grandfather, friend, and philosopher to Maharaj Yudhishthira, even up to the last moment of his life. He died very happily by seeing Maharaj Yudhishthira to the throne. Otherwise, he would have long ago quitted his material body instead of suffering agony over the undue sufferings of the Pandavas. He was simply waiting for the opportune moment because he was sure and certain the sons of Pandu would come out victorious in the battlefield of Kurukshetra, as his Lordship Sri Krishna was their protector. As a devotee of the Lord, he knew that the Lord's devotee cannot be vanquished at any time. Maharaj Yudhishthira was quite aware of all these good wishes of Bhishma Dev, and therefore he must have been feeling the great separation. He was sorry for the separation of the great soul, and not for the material body which Bhishma Dev had relinquished. The funeral ceremony was a necessary duty, although Bhishma Deva was a liberated soul. Since Bhishma Deva was without issue, the eldest grandson, namely Maharaj Yudhishthira, was the rightful person to perform this ceremony. It was a great boon to Bhishma Deva that an equally great son of the family took the last rites of a great man. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Karamayam Dadati Swapadantikam. Hey Shri Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Parijana Sahitam Shri Rupan I always Raghunathan Svitam Sadvaitam Sadvibhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya eva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnanebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Neti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Prasharine Nirvisesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Again, welcome to the class. Sorry for the delay and like I said, there's 2 classes running for this, for Krishna Island. So please have a look at Krishna Island Facebook and you'll find another class, and it's probably a better one to listen to. I'm just following the schedule, and so we're going ahead with this class. So in this verse, it's at the point where Bhishma Dev have left his body, and at the point of leaving his body, everybody's feeling quite are grieving, and they're feeling quite upset that a great soul has left. And we know from this coming up to this point, Bhishma Dev really set an example how to leave your body, and it is explained that he had a few memories that was running through his mind before he left the body. He began with thinking about Krishna as Partha Sarathi. He was a charioteer. His memories begin with remembering Krishna as a charioteer to Arjuna, and he was remembering how Krishna was just a charioteer was driving the chariot for Arjuna, taking an inferior position, and also he was remembering how he was prepared to break his promise to save Arjuna. He to protect Arjuna as a devotee, and he is also, it's described that when he broke the promise, he was running towards Bhishma, and so Bhishma was remembering this view of Krishna running towards him, and he feels that in many ways he's a lot more fortunate than Arjuna, because Arjuna was only able to see the back of Krishna when he's driving the chariot, whereas Bhishma was able to see him from the front, and he had a better view of Krishna, and he feels he's a lot more fortunate. And he was remembering these things, and he was remembering when Krishna was charging towards him with the wheel of the chariot and with his robes that was casted away, and just seeing the fury in his face. He was remembering that image, and he was saying how that was the highlight for him. And then he moved on to remembering the mood of the topmost devotees, the gopis. He was remembering what is their emotions, what are they thinking, and their mood when they are serving Krishna. And then again he drifted on to another memory where he's thinking about Krishna at the Rajasuya sacrifice of Yudhishthira, and how he was the proprietor of everything, of all the yagyas, and he was there honored as the supreme proprietor of the yagyas. And then finally he moved on to remember Krishna, who was right there, and focusing his attention upon him, he gave away his last breath. And so when he departed that way, there was a lot of silence, and we heard from the class yesterday, you know, like the day before, like by the end of the day, that the birds go silent and everybody was very quiet. And so that is the mood he left. So he set an example. And in the purport, it talks a lot. Prabhupada speaks in the beginning about how Bhishma Dev was very affectionate to the Pandavas, as well as the widowed daughter-in-law Kunti Devi, and how Maharaj Yudhishthira was also affectionate towards him. But we also know that Bhishma Dev is one of the Mahajans, and naturally he's also an Uttama Adhikari. An Uttama Adhikari, we know, is somebody who doesn't quite distinguish between, you know, they see everybody equally. A devotee or a non-devotee, they see them equally. And so this is explained that he has affection for Yudhishthira. But we also know from the Mahabharata pastime, like the story of the Mahabharata, how Bhishma Dev was also showing affection to Duryodhana. And to Duryodhana, he gave affection, I mean, like over time, because Duryodhana is also his grandson, and he was giving him affection by giving him good counsel, you know, always telling him what is the right thing to do. Of course, Duryodhana was, you know, he was rebellious and he does not want to listen, and but he didn't stop giving him that attention, that affection to Duryodhana, even though he was totally against, you know, the Dharma and accepting Krishna as the supreme person. And there are other incidences where Bhishma showed affection to Duryodhana, you know, like when we know from the beginning of the Kurukshetra war, after Duryodhana was trying to be diplomatic in trying to show the sides of Pandavas who are fighting on the side of the Pandavas and who is on the side of the Kauravas, and he was trying to, you know, somehow try and remind Bhishma Dev that your grandsons, your favorite grandsons are there, but you know, but you are fighting on this side. So he wanted him to fight for Duryodhana, and Bhishma Dev showed his affection by, you know, blowing the conch really loudly to give him the confidence that yes, I am fighting for you, although he know, you know, that it's a lost war from the start. And the other incidents we know is when while right in the middle of the battle, when Duryodhana's brothers got killed, a lot of them got killed one particular day by Bhima, and Duryodhana also came back very much wounded. He was very, very badly wounded, and Bhishma very affectionately, very lovingly took him to the tent and tried to nurse him with medicinal herbs and nurse him with mantras and try and, you know, help him to recuperate really quickly for the next day. And not only that, but the whole evening he spent with Duryodhana trying to talk to him about Krishna. He was trying to tell him about, you know, he was practically telling him about Krishna Katha the whole night. You know, still he never stopped in trying to convince Duryodhana that, or to try and teach him that his path is the wrong path and he should, that it's never too late to change. He never gave up on him. So we can see that Bhishma, you know, he has both his grandsons there, and he showed them both affection. But of course, you know, it is like having two sons, you know, one son is a bit rebellious and the other son is following. And so the nature of the relationship, you would love them the same, but the nature is such that you are going to be constantly trying to teach your rebellious son to do the right thing, whereas you're not as angry or as upset with your more obedient son. So Yudhishthira is like the obedient grandson, and he was doing everything correctly, you know, being a son of Dharma. So he and he knows that Yudhishthira and the family, they suffered a great deal, and naturally he wanted to see them come out successful. And so at this point he was very, very happy to see Yudhishthira come out victorious from the war, and giving him the right advice on what to do. So I just wanted to make that point that he the whole idea of affection here, it is not based on just the body, that they are related as grandfather and grandsons, but his affection has been very much he was showing affection to Duryodhana as well as Yudhishthira accordingly. He didn't totally, because Amajama Adhikari, wouldn't really even entertain a person who are not inclined, an atheist, or who's not inclined to God consciousness. They wouldn't even entertain them. So, but Bhishma Dev has always been the same with both of them. And so I wanted to also touch that. So we can see, like, in terms of the affection that Bhishma Dev has, the level of affection and the compassion that he has for both of them was very much based on a soul level. And we know from the Bhagavad Gita as well that when Arjuna, in the beginning, when Arjuna didn't want to fight, he put forward the what's called the argument of compassion. He felt really bad that all these soldiers on the other side, including Bhishma and Dronacharya, they're all going to be killed in the battlefield. And he didn't want to fight. And Krishna gave him the argument based on that your compassion is misplaced. You are placing the compassion on the body, and that you should be placing it by, he gives him the whole jnana about, the whole tattva about the truth about the soul and the body, how to distinguish, and where you should place that affection, where you should place that compassion. And Krishna talks from the beginning, giving first he gives the whole description about the soul and the body made out of matter, and he talks about how the soul is passing through from one body to another body, and it's going through in that journey. Dehino asmin yata dehe kaumaram yovanam jara tata dehantara pratedirastatra namuyati. So the soul is passing through from body to body, from boyhood to youth to old age, and therefore these relationships are temporary. So he was trying to advise Arjuna that you should have compassion for the soul and not just for the temporary relationships that you have there. And he gave him, he was instructing him by telling him that he should, if he really understood what is best for them, he would actually do his duty, because they are on the side of Adharma. So even though they had to die in the battlefield, they will gain a better body in the heavens. And so this is the right way to deal with. This is the right way to show compassion. This is the right way to show affection. Krishna also says in another verse, he talks about he says, it was right there, yeah, na jayate mriyate va karajinayam bhutva bhavita vana bhuyaha ajo nityas sasvato yam purano nahanyate hanyamane sarire. So Krishna, is also giving him advice. There's really no birth or death for the soul, and it hasn't come into being, will not come to being, and does not come into being, and the body is unborn. It's eternal, primeval, and ever existing. The soul. Yeah, the soul. Did I say the body? I'm really sorry. Yes, I'm referring to the soul. So the soul is all of that, not the body. And so he was trying to tell Arjuna that you should continue to fight, because because what you are destroying is the body, not the soul. The same, what do you call this? But Prabhupada says later on in the purport of 229 that it is actually very, very difficult. I mean, I know Krishna is giving Arjuna this instruction on trying to do or place your compassion or place your affection towards the soul. But to understand the soul itself, it's very, very difficult. And Prabhupada writes in the purport, it is very difficult to find a man who perfectly understands the position of the supersoul, the atomic soul, their respective functions and relationships, and all other major and minor details. And it is still more difficult to find a man who has actually derived full benefit from the knowledge of the soul, and who is able to describe the position of a soul in different aspects. But if somehow or other one is able to understand the subject matter of the soul, one's life is successful. So we have a theoretical understanding what the soul is and what is the body, and to really understand that nature, Prabhupada says, is actually extremely difficult. And in fact, we are more of at a place of just trying to figure out how this material body works. You know, we are trying to figure out how the senses work. We are figuring out how the mind works. And we're just about trying to get a grip on how this machinery works before we can really understand, have a real understanding of how the soul works. And we know from the story of King Pururava, who sang the when his wife, I mean, this is in the 11th canto when Krishna speaks to Uddhava, and he describes to him the story about King Pururava, and he sings the Aila Gita, where King Pururava, a brief introduction about him, but the king, he was the emperor of the planet, and he was totally and utterly in love with his wife at the time, who was Urvasi, and she was a heavenly society girl, and he was totally in love with her. But he met her again in Kurukshetra, but she left, and he was so devastated that she left him that he performed a sacrifice with the help of the Gandharvas, and he managed to reach the same planet that she resides. It is explained in the 9th canto that she has many times given him advice to forego sense enjoyment and practice Krishna consciousness, but he couldn't help himself. His senses were so strong, and once he got there and realizing that she left him, it really broke his heart, and he really lamented very badly. He said he was really repenting. He was repenting, like, I've wasted so much time to enjoy with her, but this enjoyment never got satiated. It's like fire that burns everything that any fuel that you throw into it, that kind of desire to enjoy. And he's so regretting that he wasted so much time doing this, and he was lamenting when she left. I am the emperor of this world, I own and this whole place, and yet she could drop me like a piece of straw, and she could just leave me that way. And he was just, the whole song in Aila Gita, he was talking about what a waste of his education, what a waste of his austerities, what a waste of all the scriptural learning he has done, the charity he has done, what a waste of all of that, when he was so drawn to her. And so he was regretting all of this. But very interestingly, in the Aila Gita, while he's talking this way, there's a switch where he talks to say that her beauty, her smile, none of these are actually the fault of my suffering. The fault of my suffering is my ignorance. And he says that the fact that to be exact, he says, the so-called beauty, sweetness, and other attractive qualities possessed by Urvasi were not the cause of my illusion. Such qualities were imagined by me because of ignorance. The material body which is subject to transformation cannot be ultimate reality. The sweet aroma, fresh youth, and other attractive qualities are simply illusions created by material nature, and yet I foolishly attributed such characteristics to Urvasi herself. So it's very interesting. King Pururava comes to realize that it is due to his desire to wanting to enjoy. Maya facilitated that in Urvasi. He whatever that he saw, whether it's just beauty. Sometimes we say, well, we are not just drawn to a person by their looks, we are drawn to their personality, or we are drawn to their character. But all of that, sometimes when we have the desire to enjoy, Maya facilitates that. She kind of makes the other object of wanting to enjoy very, very attractive. And we know that with things. We go to the shop and we see something and it looks really interesting in the shop, or it looks really, or if it's a piece of clothing, it looks really nice on us or in the shop, and then as soon as you're bringing it home, it doesn't quite have the same glimmer. It doesn't have the same excitement that it did in the shop. But it is when we go with the mood of enjoyment, Maya Devi has a way to put the sparkles on it, and so you're drawn to it. And as soon as you're finished, the sparkle is off, and you realize that was a waste of time and a waste of money. And so in the same way, Maharaj Pururava, he could see that this is not her fault at all. Even her sweetness or whatever he saw, it was not her fault, but it was his fault in thinking that she possessed them and thinking that she caused this agony. It's I heard a nice example recently. It's like somebody who's biting their tongue and they are in pain, but then they're telling somebody it's somebody else's fault that they bit their tongue, when it's they themselves who caused the pain. So it's a bit like that. And so King Pururava could understand that all his trouble is because of uncontrolled senses and the mind. And Krishna, talks to Arjuna about this in the Bhagavad Gita also. He tells him, he gives him the technical detail about how this process works, and in chapter 2, text 62 and 63, he talks, and this is what they call sometimes the fall down sequence. So when you are having some kind, you are contemplating on an object or a thing that you want to, you're thinking about it, whether this is going to be giving you any kind of pleasure. And when you think about it long enough, you form an attachment. And when that attachment comes and that, starting to desire for it, and then when you are always thinking about it, you want it and you try to acquire it. And unfortunately, whether you get it or whether you don't get it, you're always ended up disappointed. And if you definitely don't get it, that desire, that lust turns to anger, and that anger goes on to, losing of your memory, bewilderment of your intelligence, and so on and so forth. So Krishna tells Arjuna how this whole works, how your mind functions, how your mind is drawn to different things all the time, and how your mind is using the senses to get what it wants. So he gives him this technical detail. And so this is where we are at. We are trying to figure out how this mind and the senses work and how to stop. How do you stop? Because the sense objects flow into our mind consistently. It's like a flowing through, like a river towards the sea. It's constantly flowing. And we also know from the conversation between Krishna and Uddhava, where Krishna tells the story of the 4 Kumaras, And we know the four Kumars, the Brahmavadis, they've initially spent, they were Gyanis, they were philosophically trying to understand the truth, and later on they became Vaishnavas. But at that time, when they were trying to understand, as Gyanis, they meditate. And so he was trying to find out, how do we stop? So the inquiry they make to Brahma, their father, how do I stop these sense objects from entering my mind? Because if I can stop these sense objects entering my mind, then my mind can be peaceful, and therefore I can concentrate on my meditation. So how do I stop this from this incessant flow of things that flowing to my mind? And Krishna, as a Hamsa avatar, he says, well, you can't stop it. You cannot stop it, because that's just the nature of how things work in the material world. But you can, and you have to engage your mind and your senses in devotional activities. And that's the only way you can break that flow. Otherwise, by doing anything else, it is not possible. And this is quite interesting because Krishna is giving advice that by engaging in different acts of sacrifice, that is how you're able to control your mind and your senses. And he again, he talks about this again to Arjuna, that he tells him that when we are doing the act of sacrifice, whatever that is, we are doing the act of sacrifice is better done with knowledge than just sacrificing material possessions. And this is in chapter 4, when Krishna tells Arjuna. And when he means acting in knowledge, it also means acting with knowing what is the intention. What is the intention of the sacrifice? So he says in 4:30, he says in 4:33, he says the sacrifice performed in knowledge is better than mere sacrifice of material possessions. And all these performers who know the meaning of sacrifice become cleansed of sinful reactions, and having tasted the nectar of results of sacrifice, they advance toward the supreme eternal atmosphere. So that's 4:30. So, the example is like, say we have to cook, as householders, or, we all eventually have to cook to make a meal. And we have an understanding, okay, we cook because we are hungry. But as a form of sacrifice to Krishna, we understand that if we offered this food, it turns into prasadam, and the prasadam, because it's being blessed by Krishna, it helps us control our tongue. When it helps us control our tongue, belly, and genitals, our senses are controlled. It also acts, it purifies us of our previous sinful reactions. It also acts as a barrier from performing any further sinful acts. We know these things by understanding this, and with an intent to have this as a result, so that we can progress in our spiritual life, is a lot more fruitful. It's a lot more meaningful, and we will really appreciate the result of the sacrifice. So Krishna really wants us to know why we're doing what we do. And similarly, the same thing applies to any other form of sacrifice, even in terms of relationships. So again, coming back to Maharaj, to Bhishma, that his act of sacrifice, when he's showing affection, he's really he's thinking on what am I showing this affection, and us in our relationships. Do we show affection, and in what way do we show affection? Are we showing because we are just physically related, or are we friends, and in what level? So in the same way, we could spiritualize all our relationships if we have a real understanding what it is that we're having affection for. Is it for the body or is it for the soul? And how do we change that? How do we turn that relationship around so it becomes more meaningful, more spiritual? And Bhishma Dev really showed the example how he showed affection to Yudhishthira as well as to Duryodhana, because he could see that it is for the soul that needs to move forward, towards Krishna, and therefore he showed his affection in that way. So I went in a circle, and I hope it came around okay. So that is. So I'll just conclude here that to have an affection for anybody, we have to know what it is that is drawing us to have that affection, or what is the nature of the affection. Is it to the body or to the soul? Or, and if so, how? If it is just to the body, like relatives, or how do we change that? How do we change the dynamics? How do we nurture it in such a way it becomes spiritualized, it becomes more meaningful, more permanent? And we have a great example of Bhishma Dev and how he showed that example, and Yudhishthira could see, and it was heartbreaking from him, not because his grandfather has left the body, but he's heartbreaking because he was a great soul who was a philosopher, who was a teacher, who constantly guided him and his family through everything. And in that way, he feels it's a great loss that Bhishma Dev has left. I will leave that here, and I will just check quickly if there's any questions. Okay. Is any questions? There's probably nobody viewing as well, and forgive me, and I a little unprepared in many ways, as you probably noticed, and we just came back from Inishra, so we were late. Thank you so much for listening, if you did, and please forgive me for all the offenses. Srimad Bhagavatam ki Jai.